When I first discovered your social media presence, it said life coach for nice guys, which made me chuckle, literally out loud. And since knowing you, I'm very curious to hear more about your point of view on nice guys. So tell me about nice guys, please.
So nice guys, they're a
Hmm,
group of men who suffer from nice guy syndrome.
hmm,
And we're all really familiar with imposter syndrome and what that feels like. And when you level up in your career, you might have these moments of, I feel like a fraud. And it feels like imposter syndrome is so a part of our cultural narrative. Nice guy syndrome, I believe, deserves a larger, louder place in the zeitgeist because it's pervasive, infects so many men, and it creates a lot of unnecessary suffering. So you may know a nice guy in your life. And to describe him, he is really agreeable. He's easy to be around. He usually turns up on time to the birthday party. He says yes if you need to ask him a favor to help you move, to help fix a tire that's flat. He's over the top, yes, and he's over the top agreeable. The nice guy lives by the worldview that if I'm nice and I'm agreeable, then that means I deserve love and belonging and to get my needs met. So he's really hooked into this transactional agreement with the world. I'm nice and I don't ruffle feathers and I show up in a way that appeases everyone. And in return, you give me love and you give me praise and you give me recognition. The bulk of the men I've coached have been nice guys. By the way, I've dated nice guys and some of my dearest friends are nice guys. So they're wonderful human beings
hmm,
who are hooked into belief patterns that create a lot of anxiousness and misery on a daily basis
hmm,
because they need others to build them up. They're not building themselves up. And so the way that this looks is the nice guy completes a really big project at work and he cannot feel settled or good about it until he receives recognition from his boss, his team, the client, whoever it is. There's a lot of waiting in the world of the nice guy. He's waiting to hear back. He's waiting for someone to tell him that he did a good job. And there are other parts that make up the persona of a nice guy. That's the foundation. Coaching can really support him to building to the destruction of one belief system and the creation of a new one that just allows him to be himself. Because the nice guy's actually really living for everybody else's expectations. So he's hiding a lot of what's going on with him.
two questions for you. So you mentioned that the nice guy syndrome is pervasive, and what do you think it is in the world that has created so many nice guys? And what's the moment that these nice guys approach you?
So there are a couple of factors that go into creating the nice guy. And one can be something that can be helpful to explore in therapy. And it can be a rupture with a father figure and a man deciding, I do not want to be like him, whether father figure was emotionally unavailable or there was some neglect there or had anger issues, something like that. And a guy deciding I'm not going to be that way. So that's one way that nice guy syndrome can occur. Another way that I've noticed is this internalization of a lot of fear around being the toxic masculine dude.
Hmm,
And so the response to the collective disdain for toxic masculinity is, what if I'm just the most agreeable guy in the room? And if that compromises me and my integrity, it's worth it because the fear of being considered the asshole or the jerk Like the shame of is just too scary.
It resonates.
I coached a man who was in his late 50s who every single day before going home, he would respond to every single, and he was the number two at a large, fast growing organization. And he would respond to every Slack and every email, every ping he had received, or he would leave every day, even if it meant missing family dinner, missing kids' sports games, because he didn't want to be seen as the asshole who was like the leader who was too big for his britches, who wouldn't respond. And we're talking, someone pinged him and said, "Where are the extra trash bags in the kitchen?" And the real reason behind it, and he said it out loud. He said, "I want to be the asshole who doesn't respond."
Hmm. It's a question that is not written down anywhere, which is like, when doesn't like how do I explain it? Or maybe it's a statement. If you're a nice guy, you're an asshole.
Oh, I love that.
Do you know what I mean? In the sense that you are, I think I got it from your materials that you were sharing around, if you compromise on your boundaries, that it can often lead to a rebellion later or a destructive pattern that can also hurt other people. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Yes, it's really common for nice guys. Everybody needs a release valve. And if they're bottled up and the real them is never coming out, the release valve can look like pornography addiction. It can look like emotional eating. It can look like being screen addicted, having some type of sexual compulsivity. It can look a lot of ways. We see this with public figures all the time. Tiger Woods comes to mind, who everyone thought was this like perfect, polished athlete. And his release valve was partying. And so nice guys all have a release valve. And it's interesting. Sometimes it looks socially acceptable. It could be working out, it could be personal growth activities. I think sometimes when clients come to me, their release valve has just been every trendy personal growth thing, plant medicine ceremonies, ayahuasca, reading the latest books, buying the latest courses, but none of it's taking because they're not getting to the root of the issue. They're not actually changing that worldview that's keeping them hooked into that whole pattern.
Yeah, so the second question I asked you earlier, which we haven't quite touched upon, but I'll just say it again, which is, what's that moment that a nice guy comes to you? What's Why has he come to you?
The presenting problem is never the problem, we say. So it's not because he's raising his hand and says, nice guy syndrome is really limiting my whole life. It's often he feels stuck in his life in a category. And when we look at it, nice guy syndrome is holding him, but he has not labeled that. That's a pretty advanced level of self awareness. So it could be something like, I'm ready to leave my corporate job and start my business. My business has been alive for a year. I've done nothing with it. And I don't know why. I can't understand why. Another reason could be, I need to leave my job. I need to find a new professional setup. I don't have time. My life has no balance. Another one could be around time. I've coached a couple of men whose calendar, their life feels like every second is booked to the brim. And I had one client who came to me who said, I should love my life by all measures. My life is great, but I have so much stress that I can't enjoy a day of it.
Mm,
So there's something that's really tangible on the outside, and that's where we start.
okay. When you when once you've got them in the room, let's say, what are some of the kind of things that you're trying to encourage them to do? What skills are you imparting on them or fostering within them that can help them with this moment of transformation?
The biggest, most groundbreaking shift that the nice guy can make is in his relationship with himself. So as we move through let's say it's the guy who in 6 months' time wants to leave his corporate job and be full time in his business. Yet, anytime he makes even the tiniest mistake, like he forgets to buy one thing at the grocery store, he berates himself. There's no way that entrepreneurial life is going to feel satisfying in the way that he thinks it is when that's the relationship he has with himself. An actual skill that we often start with is, how do you speak to yourself kindly? And if kindly is too much of a stretch, how do you speak to yourself in a neutral tone? So we start there because so much of coaching is taking action and evaluating. What are we learning from that? And then taking action again and evaluating, or attempting an action and we didn't want to take that. Why not? So a lot of what we do is, what does it look like to take action in a new way? Buck up and not beat yourself up, because the nice guy is extremely hard on himself.
That was what I was gonna ask you actually, was you talk about encouraging the nice guy to be kind to himself, but that suggests that there's some self-loathing going on or some shame or
Shame. And the shame is coming from this sense of, I'm not good enough. Hence the reason I need you to tell me that I'm good enough, and needing the approval from other people. There are a couple different ways that the nice guy interprets shame. Sometimes he knows it's there. And that's perhaps the guy who's been engaged in other types of personal growth activities. There's the guy who doesn't know it's there, but it is absolutely driving his life. And he is living in shame avoidance. And living in shame avoidance, like the personal growthy term, that really means you're doing whatever it takes for someone not to criticize you. So it's, you're responding to every message so that no one can say, yo, where have you been? You're showing up to every social activity you've been invited to. You're not saying no, even when saying no would really serve you, because then you get to avoid all this criticism. So you're constantly trying to be in other people's brains and think, what could I do to ensure that l- everything I say or do is approved in their minds? This is an exhausting way to live. I often notice with this type of nice guy, he is worn out. He's totally worn out. And he's often looking for, what is a new way? I'm not good enough is a really common belief. I have felt that deep in my bones. It's taken me a long time, and it still shows up, but it's taken me a long time to remove that from my daily goings on. And the shame that it creates is so real. And shame feels like shit. We all want to run from the feeling of shame. And so, whether that's scrolling or whatever a preferred numbing behavior is, going for a run, whatever it looks like, humans do not want to experience shame. So, it's totally natural to have coping techniques. But shame is at the root of nice guy syndrome.
so there's one question I have which I haven't quite formulated in my head, but it's something to do with what you said shared earlier about a therapist helping with the past and a coach helping with the future. But this idea of the nice guy feeling like he needs validation, that's rooted in his past, surely. How do you explore that with them and provide that support structure whilst also helping them define a way forward?
So, all habits were formed in the past,
Mhm.
whether it's wanting validation from someone else, whether it's smoking cigarettes. But we only ever have this moment to make a new choice. And so, personally, I don't actually care when that was formed or how, because we can make a new choice, one small choice at a time, starting today.
So if a nice guy should be less nice, let's say, what should he be? What are the so again, referencing therapy, you have like younger self and core self being present day self, one of confidence and courage and feeling grounded, all this kind of stuff. What is the version of that in coaching for the nice guy? What are the goal states that we're trying to get to that don't veer him into being an asshole again?
So I already bristle at this question because I don't think anyone should be any certain way.
Uh-huh.
However, if someone comes to me and says, there's a lot of unnecessary suffering in my life, whether that looks like anxiousness or low grade misery or just a shitload of dissatisfaction in their day to day, and they express, there's got to be something out there that doesn't feel like this, then I think a goal state could look like integrity, where you're living from a place where your words, actions, and your values align. So that, and when we're living from that place, that feels different. That feels different for you than it does with me. For me, there's a lot of peace with that. For other people, that brings up joy. For other people, it's just like a state of contentment. So I would never create an agenda for someone, but what the promise is on the other side of nice guy syndrome is you actually get to be who you are. And that creates peace, period.